Okay. So welcome, Lucy. It's great to have you with us today.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here. I'm thrilled to be on your podcast.
Now, I've been following your videos for a while, and I love everything you put out there and your message to encourage more women to discover their voice and to share their message online through videos and now through online courses as well. So we'll move on to that shortly, but I'd love to start if you could just tell us, how did you come to start your own business in the first place and to develop it to where it is today?
So I was a journalist. I worked in TV for, I was 20 years a journalist. And so I worked a lot in behind the scenes. I worked in radio and then doing radio news and then TV news. And I remember the first time I had to be on TV, and it was actually, I avoided being on TV. I was sort of, people would say to me, why don't you be on TV? And I'd say, oh no. And it was always something that I feared. And then I was covering in North Korea, and essentially there was no other Western reporter in the country. So it was literally a case of, you've just got to get on and do this. And my boss swearing at me a little bit, and I just had to go and do it. And I was absolutely terrified. And that sort of started my on-screen career. And that continued, but I also was still producing for TV as well. And I worked a lot in quite difficult countries, North Korea, Iraq, China. And when I was in Iraq, it was a real moment for me to kind of reassess what I was doing and the way that I was working. And at the same time, I did a master's degree in coaching. So I had kind of downtime, but obviously I couldn't go out of my hotel very much. So I had the time to do, and I also was leaving the country. I 6 weeks in, 3 weeks out. So I completed a master's degree while I was there. And so I'd sort of put that to one side, carried on thinking, oh, I'll do something in coaching, but didn't quite know what it was. And then I was then pregnant in Ukraine, and I was taking folic acid in Ukraine, covering the conflict there. And the Russian rebels were not particularly pleasant, let's put it that way. And I just thought, I do not want to be doing this anymore. I had friends who covered, conflicts, let's say Libya, and they were pregnant. One of my friends actually wrote a book that became a movie about it. And I just thought, I don't want to be in that world anymore. And so when my son was born, I had to really think, how on earth am I going to make money? And so I started out by doing Airbnbs. So I had Airbnbs, rented out our old flat and turned that apartment into an Airbnb. And that sort of started my entrepreneurial journey. But it was a bit boring. I literally, once I'd set up all the process, and I liked playing house, but actually, the day-to-day, it was fine when I was on maternity leave with a small baby, because actually he could charm the guests and that was fine. But actually, once I'd set it all up, I wanted more. And so I returned to the coaching, but I thought, how do I put my own spin on it? And I realized from working with lots of different coaches that they were all afraid of getting visible and putting themselves out there and sharing their story, sharing their message. And it's so important to be able to share your message, put yourself out there. And if you don't do that, it's much harder to sell. It's much harder to build connection, build an audience. And if you're going online and you're building a brand, you still need to make those connections in the same way that you do at a marketing event or at a networking event. And so you just need to do it through video. And when you are online and you get to see people and you watch their videos and you're watching their videos on a regular basis, you feel like you know that person, even if they don't really know you. And so the reality is that was the catalyst for me to realize, okay, there's a market in this and potential from that. So I started working one-on-one with people. And then as my business grew, I got to a point where I was kind of beyond capacity, and I had to find another way of working. And that was the point that I started on my course creation journey, which I know we will come to.
I love that story. And it's really interesting, isn't it? How I sometimes think it's a bit of a privilege as women when you have these points in your career, like having children, or maybe you have to take time out to look after elderly relatives, then you have to rethink. But often that's a really opportunity to take a step back and think, well, what do I really want to be doing? How do I really want to be using all of my talents and experiences to create something different and valuable in the world? And it's wonderful that you came across your perfect niche. And I see the same particularly with a lot of the coaches that I work with. They're very used to it all being about their client and not being about them. So the idea of them having a message and being in spotlight isn't a natural place for them to be necessarily. But as you say, engaging people through video, there's no faking it. You are you, and so it's the most engaging way to go, but it can be a bit scary at first.
Absolutely. It's, I understand that for many people it's terrifying I felt the same way, to be on camera, and people might worry about their accent or just the way they sound or the way they look. But the reality is that people want us to be real. They want us to show up warts and all and be human. And that means making mistakes, having screw ups, and also not being perfect. And actually it's those imperfections that make us much more real and make it that's something that people actually prefer, and it means they connect with you at a deeper level.
Yeah, I know when I started my public speaking journey, sort of 15, 16 years ago now, I joined the Toastmasters Club because I wanted to be able to present my ideas more clearly at work and start engaging people in where I wanted to go and my vision. And I wanted to do that well. But I'm a shy girl. That was always my label growing up. And so it wasn't the natural place for me to be standing up in the middle of a room. So I think it was like 5 or 6 months before I had the courage to speak up. And like other people were jumping in straight away from their first meeting, that the whole idea terrified me. But once I got started on that journey, it became easier and easier. And moving into video, I used transcription so that I could film myself and read the script at the same time. But it took so long to write the script and then to redo it. And so once I got a bit comfortable, I started just going to like a post-it note with a few bullet points on. But when I moved and it became a bit more, less perfect, but more me, then I saw that people really engage with the videos a lot more. So that was a really interesting to see. And now with my public speaking as well, I've practiced enough and I've got the stories in my back pocket, so that if I do find I've got a gap to fill, then I have that confidence now that I can do that. But again, the confidence has come from just doing it over and over. It wasn't something I started with. So it's been, an interesting ride, but nice to see that the less perfect my videos are, the better people enjoy them, or the more people enjoy them, I should say.
I think that's really the case, because they want to know the real you. And so while a lot of my videos, say my YouTube videos, might be much more kind of scripted, or just not so much scripted but planned. I try to keep my Facebook lives that they're very impromptu and I'm just having a chat, so that people can access different sides to me, rather than all being say planned and makeup and all those things. Whereas often my Instagram lives are just after the school run and I'm just like weather beaten and like so that people get to know you rather than just one side of you. It's a bit like you might meet somebody and the first impression, you want to create a first impression that's like really professional, but actually when they get to know you, that means when you've just when you're just having a coffee or just being a bit more relaxed, and that's the same with video. People want to see different sides to you.
That's a really interesting concept about using video, but in to show different facets of your character and what you're all about, so that people can, over time, they like from your YouTube video, they can see that you have the expertise, and then from the Facebook lives or Instagram lives, they can see that you really have the passion and you care. So you kind of have all of the different elements of the message that you want to get across. I love that idea.
So I use my YouTube videos as lead generation. You think people type a question into Google and they're asking a question. How do I grow my business, or how do I create a course? And so my YouTube videos are very much how to. So it's building that expertise, and they're finding those answers. So they watch a few of those, but then it might be, then I say, oh, connect with me on Instagram or check out my Facebook group. And then they get to know me personally. And that's much more of a deeper connection. So it's a deeper connection on, let's say, Instagram, where it's, it's less professional. It's more about the relationships, and they get to, see behind the scenes of the chaos of my life so people see all facets of you. And that means showing up when you do Instagram lives, they're usually me doing school run, whereas they're more polished for that initial meeting on YouTube.
Yeah. And so when it comes to producing videos, are there any basic absolutely must-have? So whether it's the polished YouTube video or the Instagram live spontaneous video, is there anything you think, okay, just don't go live without these one or two things in place?
So I think it depends on the platform. So if you think about it, a lot of people are they might Google a question, put a question into Google and say, how do I do X, Y, Z? And they may be half listening, probably listening, but maybe not watching your video on YouTube. They may be just listening in the background while they're doing something to, oh, how do I do X, Y? And so they want the answer. So you want to make sure that your YouTube videos are good quality audio. That's really important. Whereas actually on Facebook, 90% of people are listening on mute. So they're not actually hearing what you say. So in fact, the stat of, I think it's actually now 95%. And so captions really are very helpful for that reason, because there's such a high percentage of people watching on mute. And so actually a lot of people who worry about how they sound or English as a second language, all of those issues, actually on Facebook, they're not issues, because 95% of people are watching your mouth talk, but they don't know what's coming out of your mouth. All they're looking at is, oh, she's got a nice background, and oh, I like her necklace, and all of those kind of things. So it's almost superficial. And that's why thinking about your backdrop, thinking about how you're going to stand out, makes a substantial difference on Facebook, because you want to stand out. And obviously the captions, so people do understand what you're saying, makes a big difference.
I didn't realize that. That's really interesting. Yeah. Brilliant. So when it comes, you were talking earlier about course creation, and a lot of course creation is creating videos to go with that as well. Is there a difference between those kind of videos, or is that going to be kind of a bit more like the YouTube planned videos that you put out there?
It depends what kind of course you're creating. It might be, for some people, actually, it's not necessarily videos, it's guided meditations, or it's sound. So it doesn't have to, with course creation, it doesn't have to be video, but obviously a lot of people are creating videos. With them, you don't have to be on screen all the time. Particularly if you're trying to share a lot of content and a lot of different concepts and ideas, actually by mixing it up and having screen shares or just having graphics on the screen makes it more interesting. If somebody's got to sit through a video that's a certain length and it's just literally watching you, it's easier to have some things fly in of graphics or to actually have a screen share, so that there's movement on the page and the brain keeps engaged, and it's easier to learn in that way.
Yeah, that's great. I had one mentor, and with his program, he started off having these really professional videos that someone else had made, and it had him from different angles, and it was really professional. But only the first three, and then after that, he's like, it was too expensive, it was too long, it wasn't a fun process. And so then he just started doing presentations and doing a screen share, and actually they worked even better because you were getting more of him. He was more in the moment rather than trying to come across professional. So you were getting much more value from that. So I think that's great advice to think about mixing it up, and it doesn't always have to be, I think we always feel it has to be like uber professional, but the professional element is really in getting the message across rather than how you look necessarily.
Absolutely. And there are some very successful courses that don't have anyone on screen. So you don't have to be, you don't have to feel that you have to be on screen. It obviously helps for people to get to know you and build that relationship, but it doesn't need to be you all the time.
Yeah, great. So when it comes to course creation, how do people start? I think this is always a sticking point, is that like, I'd like to create a course, but then when you look at what you teach people or what your knowledge is, it's so vast, it's sometimes overwhelming to take that first step. Do you have any advice for people on how to get started with creating a course from their, like downloading their IP into something that works for others?
So I think one of the most important things when it comes to creating a course is really understanding your ideal client and their pain point. And when I say ideal client, I don't mean what car they drive, how old they are. I mean the problem that you are solving. So, and when you really niche down on the problem that they have, you are then having, you're speaking a universal language. And by really spending some time and doing research into that particular problem, then it's much easier to sell. You can actually pre-sell the course because you've really identified that problem. And by identifying that problem, then from that point, it's easier to then create a course, because you can then say, is this going to help this person? Yes or no. So then it's easier to then remove bits of information so you can streamline the course rather than ramming everything into one course. The second thing to say on that is also you want to really focus down. So rather than digging a spade across let's say 5 meters of earth, digging, and you go down, let's say 20 centimeters, 30 centimeters. If you were to focus that spade on one spot and you dig down really deep, you're niching down, but you're giving excellent information. You're really training somebody in one specific area. And so by doing that, you can then teach them one particular element, one skill. So for example, I have a course on camera confidence. So by teaching people how to be camera confident, they can then go and I'll teach them other things about video. But by having this one specific niche, it means that's the entry level course. That's their pain point. That's their problem. And then from that, they realize, oh, actually, now I'm feeling a little more confident being on camera. Actually, there's other things I want to learn, like how to use YouTube or other things. But I've started with what I identified one particular pain point, and we drilled down on that.
I love that advice. And I love that you brought up about that I see a lot of people struggling with their niche, or when I have the first call with them, like, yes, it's women between 25 and 40. They live in this area, that they drive this kind of car. So, but that doesn't tell you enough to connect with them. And as you were saying with the videos, it's all about that connection, building that rapport. And so you're really creating a space where people can get the knowledge they away, because there's probably several people teaching about video, but in different ways, and there's going to be people that will connect with you. Perhaps Gary Vee is teaching videos, but of course his style is completely different, and he's going to have a very different market. So you want to be connecting with those people that you want to go on a journey with, and that you can create just really so much value. So finding that problem and what they're trying to achieve in their life, and how what you're teaching is going to help them on that transformation journey as well, is much more useful than just having sort of demographic niche as well. And I think a lot of people miss that. And when you have that problem nailed, then it really helps with all of your communications and marketing and product development and everything from there. It makes everything so much simpler, but it's not always easy to nail down that problem necessarily. I like to think of it like, if my client was half drunk, what would they say? They're like, oh, I just want this, you know. I was like, great, that's where you can start.
That's a great, yeah, it's exactly, it took me a good while to really nail that, the problem factor. And I think sometimes by talking about nailing your niche, it's one of those sort of buzzwords, but it doesn't mean anything to a lot of people when they're first starting out. But actually it's the half drunk analogy of like, what's that absolute problem? But once you've got that, it's right. The marketing, your emails you send. Until I nailed my niche, I used to really struggle writing emails. But once you've nailed your niche, then it's like, oh, I'm just talking to this person about this thing. And it just flows. It's not, so it makes everything so much easier.
Yeah, exactly. It's really, when people are looking for a hack for their business, it's like, oh, it's understand who it is you're speaking with, and what you want to, where you want to take them, how you want to use your experience and talents to help them move forward with their journey. So then once you know that, think, well, okay, well, they need to know this and that, the other, and that comes back to the course creation, of course, as well. It all comes together so much quicker. Yes. So you've talked a bit about confidence, and I see that that's something that a lot of particularly female business owners struggle with. I know a lot of men struggle with it too. What do you feel are maybe the biggest misunderstandings when it comes to confidence, or the things that hold women back the most in that area?
I think we have a lot of internal dialogue about not being worthy enough, not being good enough. And we carry scripts and stories that we generate between the age of 0 and 5. And these stories continue. Let's say most of our scripts are developed under the age of 10, and we then carry these scripts for the rest of our lives about our ability to do things, our limitations, our failings, and our place in, even in our family pecking order, all of those kind of stories. And so I was definitely the youngest, and so I think a lot of my stories are kind of like, oh, Lucy, shut up, and so from older siblings. And so those feelings of not wanting to speak up, or being scared of being mocked for speaking up or saying my truth, probably resonate from that era. And everybody has their own unique story and their own scripts that they rerun and repeat. And so it's about retraining our scripts and recognizing those scripts. So my course kind of does a bit of the retraining of, like, we do some of the tech stuff, but also it's actually looking at where you rewrite your scripts, and you are identifying what those negative critic, what that inner critic is saying to you, and then rewriting, reframing that thinking. And once you're able to recognize that thinking and be aware of it, be conscious of it, then you can rewrite it. Or you can just say, I know you're taking care of me. I know that my inner critic, I know you're trying to help me, but actually at this point, I've got this, I'm okay. And by being able to sort of recognize that and push it to one side, I remember one of my first yoga teachers teaching me to see meditations like a blue sky, and each thought is a cloud. And if you can just blow that negative thought away, just push it to one side, then you create blue sky. And it's that same feeling when it comes to the negative thoughts that surround us. And particularly when it comes to being visible. And if we can push that to one side and just focus on, I'm just going to get this done. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be safe. It's not the end of the world. This is going to be okay. And if you can reassure the inner child in you that has these fears about being visible, and you say, we're going to be okay, we'll do this together, then actually you can do it. And by the time you've done it 3 or 4 times, then suddenly it becomes so much easier.
Yeah, then you're rewriting your beliefs a little bit. And it's quite amazing, isn't it, when you start to become aware of these thoughts, because we have a lot of these thoughts without being conscious of them that are holding us back. But once you, like, I started writing mine down a few years ago, probably 6-7 years ago now, and I just started noting them down, being aware. I was like, oh, that's not a helpful comment, let's write it down, and then reading them back and think, oh my gosh, these are just ridiculous. The things I was holding myself back over or telling myself were just complete nonsense and not in the least bit true or helpful, or definitely not kind as well. So just becoming aware of those over time enabled me to blow more of those clouds away as well. And it was just, yeah, it's liberating. It's so amazing when you can do that. It's a process, so it doesn't happen overnight, of course, but I think that's great advice.
And we're all work in progress all the time. So even though, we might think we've cleared something or dealt with something, then we sort of discover. I was journaling this morning and thinking, oh, am I not doing that because I'm holding myself back? And I suddenly realized, oh yes, I'm holding. And it's even stories that you think you've dealt with, I don't know, 10 years ago, and it's coming back again. So yes, it's a never-ending journey.
Yeah, and I think particularly for business owners or entrepreneurs, because where you start is never where you end up. So you start in one place and you have all these, you work through the process and you become more confident, you nail it, but then you have to move forward. You have to take your business to the next scale, or chase down that next opportunity, or pivot or evolve in some area, and then you have to go through that whole process again. But it's just the most amazing journey of self-development in the process. It's really quite exciting, as long as you take it from that point of view as well and don't just see it as exhausting.
Yes, and I think that's exactly it, that it's always an evolution. And yeah, it's not about seeing it as we are always changing and evolving, and we will pivot in our business so many different times in different ways, and we'll be doing things differently to the way we did it a year ago or 2 years ago. And that's the nature of being in business, and particularly in 2020 with so much going on with with COVID.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that constant evolution, but always, as long as you have that clear vision and direction, then it's always going to be evolution in the right direction, which is always exciting.
Yes.
So, Lucy, you've shared so much value, like really so much value today, and you've had just the most extraordinary journey to get to where you are today, and I've loved learning more about how that's evolved for you. Is there any standout lessons that you think, oh, that was like the biggest thing I've learned that you'd like to pass on, or something that you feel that everyone should be prepared for as they go into their journey?
I think one of the biggest learnings for me, I wasn't a natural business owner. It's not something that my parents have done. And so I had to really step into sort of selling myself and all of those things, which again, it's a bit like being on video. There's a vulnerability to it. But it's really recognizing that all of those things, it takes time, whether it's being visible, whether it's selling yourself. You will get more confident doing it. But there are ways to make it easier. And the ways, I definitely think to make it easier is actually by automating the process. So if you create one sales video and that does the selling for you, then basically you remove that obstacle. And it does the work for you. And so the more that you can, particularly in 2020, the more you can automate your business and the processes, setting up those, getting someone who's a really good tech VA who can automate all of those processes, that will make the absolute game changer for your business, because you can easily then create videos that really work and sell, generate leads to your business, and then ultimately sell digital products, or even selling yourself in one-to-one services. But if it's automated, it kind of removes you from a lot of the process, which makes things so much more, just it means you can scale so much more effectively.
Yeah, I love that. And particularly for well, like myself, I'm building my business, but around my family. So there's only so many hours in a day I have, and I can't be up till 2 o'clock in the morning because you have to be at 6 with the kids. So having that automating as much as possible, it goes a long way to building a sustainable business, and not feeling that you have to stay stuck in sort of hobby mode because you only have so many hours, but you can actually build a very interesting, very successful business that makes a big impact by being smart in the way that you build that out. And as you say, automating as many processes as you can while still having a very personal journey for your clients. I love that.
Yes, it definitely, that was really, once I sort of figured that out, that was the thing that enabled me to scale. So no matter how many hours you have in the day, I definitely was not particularly involved in my business for a good 5-6 months of this year, but I was still selling every day because I'd automated those systems and processes. And it does mean that whatever life throws at you, whether it's homeschooling or sickness or whatever, you still can, you can still create a business that is selling on repeat and working for you.
Yeah, and that's so important. As you say, you never know what's coming up around the corner, but also we see a lot of businesses where they don't have any clients, they do a lot of marketing, then they get a lot of clients and they do nothing, and then they always have this kind of roller coaster business. They never have the consistency needed to build the confidence and the capacity to scale. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much, Lucy, for everything that you shared. I'm going to put all of your links down below so people can come and find you if they want to know more, and they can come and tune into your YouTube channel. But for people who are listening to the podcast on the go, how can they find you?
So I am lucygriffiths.com. And if you want to find me on, say, Instagram or YouTube, I'm also lucygriffiths.com. So that's the best way to find me on any of those platforms.
Brilliant. I'm sure you're going to have lots of people coming and checking you out. So thanks again, Lucy. You shared so much value. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've learned a lot as well, which is always really great. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.